Satis, the goddess who protects the southern border of Kemet, a very important deity that we're going to talk about today. Before we get started, I want to ask you to hit that like and subscribe. It does so much to help the channel grow. Now, this deity, Satis, is someone I've talked about previously, and I've explained some of her symbolism and how she's typically depicted. Now, typically when we see this depiction of this female nectar, she's often shown wearing the white crown, which represents Upper Kemet, right? This is a time, representing when the deities manifested in the upper or lower half of the kingdom, and then at times they would be united. And this is obviously very important. She did have a cult center at Elephantine, and she was held in very high regard. And we're going to talk about the importance of that connection to Elephantine, which is also about the Nile's annual flooding, which she was a big part of as well. So she plays a role not only in protecting the southern border, which was political and spiritual, but she's also associated with the inundation of the Nile, and she plays a role in the afterlife, or your journey to the afterlife, which is what her association with the southern border also implies. She also has a very significant importance or connection to the Sirius star, being seen as the brightest star in the sky. And there's a couple of utterances that we're going to talk about in the pyramid text and the coffin text that kind of confirm some of the things that we've been hearing about her. Now, the first one happens to come from the pyramid text. This is utterance 508. And this is by a king who is ascending into the sky. Again, post-life, this is in the afterlife and how he's on his journey. And he says, Satis has cleansed me with her 4 jars from Elephantine. Now, that reference is probably talking about the caverns that ran along near the Nile that came up on the island of Elephantine. And this was kind of seen as a passageway into the underworld, the south being where the dead resided in this belief system here. Now, she is also linked with several nectars. Among them is Khnum and Montu, 2 very powerful, if not very different nectars, who she was written about as being their consort. Either one of them having been the consort, depending on which kingdom and which writing you were actually seeing. She is also linked to Anuket, and their bond was about the inundation or the flooding of the Nile, whereas Satis represented the flooding of the Nile or the coming of the Nile, and Anuket represented the withdrawal. And I also talked about her association with the Sirius star, which to me is one of the most important aspects of her lore, her mythology. And I'm going to read a couple of passages that link to that, because it talks about not only her connection with it, but her position as it was rising, the movement of the stars in the constellations. Now, the first one says, now this is going to be Pyramid Text 439 utterance, again by a deceased king who is identifying himself with Satis or on his journey. And he says, I am Satis who takes possession of the 2 lands, the burning one who receives her 2 shores. Now, this is important because the burning one name is a clear indication that they were talking about the Sirius star, and enforces her connection with that very important celestial body in the sky. Now, it would further go on to say from the king, I have gone up to the sky and found Re standing that I meet him. I will seat myself beside him. Now, this is probably relying to the rising of Sirius star, in which it appears on the horizon equal level with the sun, that being Ra, and she being the representation of that particular star. It goes on further to say in Coffin Text spell 937, it says, Satis opens to me the cleared path, and my glance falls on all of those, the evil ones who are in the caverns. Again, we talked about the passage through those caverns, and she illuminates them. This is where she is providing protection in that illumination through the underworld, shining a light on all the many menaces that face Abba as you're on that journey through that portion of the underworld. She also has another characteristic that is spoken about in that connection, and this one is delivered by Thoth or Jehudi, and it says, those who shall come against you, meaning the deceased, from the south, again that connection with death, shall be driven off by Satis, who is Lady of Elephantine, who will shoot at them with her arrows, which are painful and sharp against them. So again, we get so much information from the sacred text, which is why it's so important to be able to have access and read those texts and see what we can continue to learn from those particular utterances about the various deities. So again, Satis, someone we need to know a lot about, who has connections not only to the flooding of the Nile, but also your passage through the underworld and a connection with the brightest star, which is a source of much knowledge per this Kemetic pantheon. So if you have something that you would like to add to this piece about Satis, please do so in the comment section. As always, I'm going to again ask that you hit that like and subscribe, and while you're at it, click the notification bell so you know when new videos are going to drop.